I never thought a stack of dusty papers would feel like a punch to the gut. My name's Claire. I'm 37, a logistics consultant living in Sacramento. I spend my days fixing other people's problems, but that afternoon, I was at my dad's apartment, helping him sort through some insurance forms. He's getting older, and the paperwork has gotten confusing for him. I told myself I was just there to help, that I didn't mind, but the truth is, I've always been the one who keeps things running in this family, whether anyone notices or not. Dad was in the kitchen, rattling around for more coffee, while I sat cross-legged on the worn carpet, my laptop balanced on a cardboard box. The place still smelled like home, old coffee and stale air, the way it always had. I was scrolling through files on a flash drive when I noticed the binder on the bottom shelf. It was thick, with a cracked spine, and Mom's looping handwriting across the cover. Business succession, final copy. I hesitated. It wasn't what I was there for, but something about those words, final copy, made me reach for it. I flipped it open and started skimming through. Page after page of legal forms, signatures, official stamps. And there it was, clear as day. My parents had transferred the vineyard, the family business, the house, the whole damn legacy, over to Jonah, my brother, the one who never finished college, who can't hold a job for more than 6 months. My name was in there exactly once, a vague sentence about equal love and shared responsibility. That was it. No shares, no mention of the money I'd sent home every time things fell apart. No mention of the nights I stayed up, calculating how to pay the workers when Jonah forgot. Nothing. I felt my chest tighten, like the air had been sucked out of the room. My mind was racing. Why Jonah? Why would they do this? I'd spent years keeping this place alive, fixing the old irrigation system, paying the taxes when a frost ruined the grapes last year. They never even asked. I just did it because that's what you do for family. I heard Dad's footsteps behind me, the soft shuffle of his old slippers. He set a mug of coffee on the floor beside me and sat down heavily on the couch. You found it, he said softly. He didn't sound surprised. I swallowed hard, turning the binder around so he could see the words. You just gave it all to Jonah, I said, my voice low. And me? I get a line about shared responsibility? He let out a long sigh, like he'd been holding it in for years. Claire, you've always been the steady one. Jonah, he needs this. You're doing fine on your own. I almost laughed, but it came out more like a scoff. I'm doing fine because I made sure this place didn't fall apart. You think Jonah's going to save it? He doesn't even know how to turn on the irrigation system. Dad's eyes fell to the coffee in his hands. He didn't argue, and that hurt more than if he'd yelled. It was like he'd already decided that this was how it was going to be, and I'd just have to understand. I thought you'd see it that way, he said quietly. We figured you'd understand. I closed the binder, the pages rustling under my fingers. My mouth felt dry, but I didn't trust myself to speak again. I pushed myself up off the floor, brushing off my jeans. I need some air, I said, my voice steady even though my hands were shaking. I didn't slam the door when I left, but a part of me wanted to. I stepped outside into the cool evening air and just stood there for a minute, letting it all sink in. The vineyard, the land I'd worked so hard to keep alive, was gone. Handed over to someone who didn't even care enough to show up on time for Christmas dinner. And me? I was just a footnote. Standing there, I realized something. I'd always believed if I worked hard enough, if I just kept fixing everyone else's problems, they'd see me. But now, staring at the sunset over those grapevines, I knew I'd been fooling myself. And for the first time in a long time, I wasn't sure I could keep pretending. I spent the rest of that evening in my car, parked at the edge of the vineyard where the rows of grapevines stretched out in the dim light. I'd grown up here, racing between those vines with Jonah when we were kids, dirt on our knees and the sweet smell of ripe fruit hanging in the air. It felt like another lifetime. I watched the sun sink behind the hills, remembering all the ways I'd tried to keep this place alive. No one had ever asked me to do it. No one had even noticed most of the time. But I'd done it anyway, because I thought that's what family was. Because I thought it mattered. I remembered the frost last spring, how the cold had come out of nowhere, killing half the crop overnight. Jonah had been in Santa Cruz, taking a break from figuring out what he wanted to do with his life. I'd wired the money to replace the ruined vines without even telling my parents it came from me. They just assumed it had come from somewhere, and I let them. That's what I did, I made things work. I thought about the summer Dad threw his back out, how I'd driven up every weekend from Sacramento to make sure the harvest got done. Hired extra help, found a neighbor with a spare harvester when ours broke down. Wrote the checks, fixed the schedules, kept the grapes moving from field to barrel. I thought about the taxes, the endless bills that kept piling up. I'd always just paid them, without saying a word, because I knew if I didn't, no one else would. I didn't do it for recognition, but in that moment, sitting in my car, staring at the rows of vines I'd saved, I realized how much it hurt that they'd never even said thank you, that they'd never seen any of it as mine. Just something I was supposed to do, like it was my job to keep everything running. The porch swing creaked in the wind, and I thought about how I'd fixed that, too. Took a Saturday off to replace the rusted chains and sand down the wood so Mom could sit there in the evenings and watch the sunset. No one asked me. No one thanked me. It was just another thing I did because I couldn't stand to see it broken. I leaned back in my seat, staring at the shadows creeping across the vineyard. Jonah was probably inside right now, feet propped up on Dad's coffee table, laughing about something on TV. And he was the one they trusted to carry this on. He was the one they'd chosen. I let out a long breath, feeling something settle deep in my chest, a quiet, heavy ache I didn't know what to do with. I'd always believed that if I kept showing up, kept fixing what was broken, it would mean something, that it would matter. But looking at those rows of vines in the dying light, I knew the truth. It had never been enough. I had never been enough. I stayed there until the stars came out, the air cold and sharp around me. Then I turned the key in the ignition and drove back to my apartment, the road winding away behind me. No calls, no texts, just the quiet hum of the tires on asphalt and the hollow feeling in my chest. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I just felt empty, like I'd finally run out of ways to make it work. And maybe, just maybe, I was done trying. The next morning, I drove back to my parents' place, telling myself I just wanted to see how they were doing. Really, I think I was hoping for some kind of explanation, anything to make it make sense. Mom was out on the porch when I pulled up. She was wearing that shawl I'd bought her for her birthday a couple of years back. I'd given her cash, thinking she'd use it for something she really wanted. Jonah had given her a doodle he'd scribbled on a napkin. She still had that napkin taped to the fridge. She smiled when she saw me, like everything was fine, like she hadn't just signed my entire life's work over to Jonah. "Morning, Claire," she said softly, folding the shawl around her shoulders. "Morning," I replied, my voice tight. I climbed the steps and stood beside her, feeling the boards shift under my feet. She reached out and took my hand, her skin warm and papery. "You've always been the steady one," she said, her thumb brushing over my knuckles. "Your brother, he needs more help than you do." "Help?" I pulled my hand back gently, trying to keep my voice calm. "How much help, exactly?" She hesitated, looking down at the porch boards. "Well, we co-signed a loan for him a while back. $75,000. He needed it to get back on his feet." I stared at her, my mouth going dry. 75,000. My mind spun, adding up every dollar I'd ever sent them, every bill I'd quietly paid off to keep things afloat. All of it, just a drop in the bucket they'd poured into Jonah's hands. "You co-signed that much for him?" My voice was quiet, but I could feel the anger simmering underneath. "And you never thought to tell me?" Her eyes flicked up to meet mine, a glimmer of guilt there before she looked away again. "We didn't want to worry you. We thought it would work out. He promised us it would." "Of course he did," I said flatly. "And the will? The binder I found? That was just the final formality, wasn't it? You'd already bet everything on him years ago." She didn't argue. She didn't even try. She just stood there, her shoulders slumping under the weight of her own silence. I wanted to scream. I wanted to shake her, to make her see how much it hurt. But I didn't. Because I think, in that moment, I finally understood, they'd never really seen me at all. Not the way I'd hoped they would. I took a step back, the cold morning air biting at my face. "I have to go," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. She reached out for me again, but I pulled away. I didn't want her comfort. Not when it came wrapped in the same softness that had let Jonah keep taking and taking. I walked to my car, feeling the weight of the past settle on my shoulders like a shroud. I'd spent my whole life trying to be enough, trying to prove that I could carry the weight of this family's dreams. But standing there on that sagging porch, I realized it had never been my dream at all. It had always been theirs. And I was just the one who made sure it didn't fall apart. I drove away without looking back, the vineyard shrinking in the rearview mirror. The road was quiet, the only sound the low hum of the engine and the steady thud of my own heartbeat. I didn't have a plan. I didn't know what came next. But for the first time, I didn't feel like it was my job to figure it out. And that, I thought, was the first real freedom I'd ever tasted. Back at my apartment, I sat on the edge of my bed, phone in hand. My head felt heavy, like I'd been swimming underwater all day. I scrolled through my bank app, the screen glowing bright in the dim room. First, I canceled the automatic payment for the vineyard's electricity bill. Then the water. The irrigation system that kept the vines alive in the scorching summer heat, gone. I deleted the recurring order for the produce boxes I'd been sending up there every week, full of fresh vegetables I knew Mom liked. I canceled the small monthly payroll I'd been quietly covering for the seasonal workers Jonah always forgot to pay. No note, no explanation, just clicks and confirmations, one after another. For a long time, I sat there in the quiet, the only sound the hum of the old refrigerator in the kitchen. My hands shook a little, but I didn't feel regret. Not this time. I wasn't going to play the part of the quiet helper anymore. At first, no one noticed. The sun still rose over the vineyard. The vines still turned their leaves toward the light. I knew Dad would think the flickering lights in the barn were just a bad bulb. He'd tinker with it himself, muttering about old wiring and patch jobs. But a week later, I started to get the texts. Mom, in her careful, polite tone, "Hi, honey. I think something's wrong with the water. Could you look at it?" Then Dad, "Claire, did you cancel the irrigation order?" I thought it was still on auto. I read them and put my phone down. Didn't answer. For once, I let the questions hang in the air, let them feel the weight of all the things I'd held up for them. A couple of days later, Jonah sent me a message. Just a short line, "You know you're making this harder than it has to be." I didn't respond. I think he was expecting me to. He'd always been good at making it seem like it was just a misunderstanding, like I was the one overreacting. But this wasn't that. This was me stepping back. At night, I'd sit on my tiny balcony, a glass of water in my hand, watching the city lights flicker and fade. In my head, I could still see the vineyard, the rows of green and gold, the quiet hum of the land I'd fought to save again and again. But it didn't belong to me anymore. It never had. The next week, Dad called. I didn't answer. I let it go to voicemail, his voice tired and resigned. "Claire, I know you're upset. But we need your help. Just, let's talk." I didn't call back. Because the truth was, for the first time in my life, I didn't want to help. I didn't want to be the one who kept it all going while everyone else got to sit back and call it love. The hardest part was the silence. But even that felt like a kind of relief. Because in the quiet, I finally heard my own voice, steady, certain, and not asking anyone's permission to be done. So I let it be quiet. Let them feel the gap I'd left behind. Let them figure out how to patch it themselves. I knew they'd never say it, but the truth was clear. I had always been the one holding it all together. And now? I was done. A few days after I stopped answering calls and emails, the family started shifting gears. At first, it was polite concern, Mom's texts about how worried she was, how she just wanted to understand what was going on. But when I didn't respond, the tone changed. It started with a voicemail from my cousin Leah. "Your mother is worried sick," she said, her voice low, like she was sharing a secret. "She doesn't understand why you're doing this. None of us do." She paused, as if waiting for me to jump in, then hung up without saying goodbye. Then there was the Facebook post. Mom, of course. A soft photo of the vineyard at sunset. She'd always been good at making things look prettier than they really were. Underneath, she wrote, "We gave all we had, but love isn't always enough. Family is about forgiveness." It was vague enough that no one outside our circle would know what she meant, but clear enough for me to see. They were already rewriting the story. Jonah's comment was right below it. "Some people only show up when it benefits them," he wrote, tagging me in the post like he was calling me out in front of the world. My phone buzzed with notifications, likes and sad face emojis from people I hadn't seen in years. Old family friends, people from town who thought they knew what kind of daughter I was. I sat on my couch, phone in hand, watching it all happen like it was some bad soap opera. I felt my face flush hot, my pulse thudding in my ears. It was one thing to be left out. It was another to be turned into the villain. I opened my messages and found one from an old family friend. "Claire, what's going on? Your mom says you cut them off. She's heartbroken." My fingers hovered over the keyboard. I almost wanted to explain, to lay out every receipt, every loan, every favor I'd done to keep things running. But I stopped myself. They wouldn't believe it anyway. They'd already decided I was the problem. I set my phone down and stared at the blank wall across from me. They were twisting the story, turning my silence into cruelty. And maybe that hurt more than the betrayal itself. Because it meant they'd rather pretend I was selfish than admit they'd never really seen me at all. I thought about calling Mom, demanding she take the post down, but I knew it wouldn't matter. She'd just say it was a misunderstanding, that she didn't mean to make it sound like I'd abandoned them, that I was reading too much into it, like always. So I let it go. Let them play their parts. Let them paint me as the daughter who walked away when things got hard. Because deep down, I knew the truth. I'd been carrying that family on my back for years, and they'd never once seen it. Not really. As the sun dipped low over the city skyline, I closed my eyes and let the anger wash over me, then fade. I didn't want to fight with them. I didn't want to defend myself anymore. I just wanted to be free. A week later, an envelope arrived at my door. It was thick and heavy, with the vineyard's name printed in big letters on the return address. I held it in my hands for a long moment before opening it, already guessing what it was. Foreclosure notice. A final demand for payment. Legal language stacked on top of itself, black ink screaming what I'd already known was coming. I sat down at my small kitchen table, the letter spread out in front of me. My hands were steady. My heartbeat was not. I flipped it over, grabbed a pen, and wrote a single sentence on the back. Maybe you should have left it to someone who could manage it. Then I stared at the words for a minute, feeling the weight of everything I hadn't said for years pressing down on my chest. I didn't send it. Just folded the notice up and set it aside. Because there was nothing left to say. A couple of days later, I found myself pulling up county records on my laptop. Part of me was curious. Part of me just wanted to see how bad it really was. The numbers were there in black and white: liens, unpaid taxes, late fees. Jonah had burned through everything. Maybe even the little bit mom and dad had stashed away for emergencies. For a moment, my old habits kicked in, calculating, planning, mentally rewriting the spreadsheets I'd spent years using to save the vineyard. I almost opened my banking app, the impulse as automatic as breathing. But I stopped. I closed the laptop and pushed it away. I wasn't going to fix this. Not this time. I drank a glass of water, the coolness washing the dryness out of my throat. Then I just sat there, breathing in the quiet, letting the reality sink in. They'd chosen this. Every decision, every lie, every time they told me I'd understand. And they were the ones who'd have to live with it. Not me. The foreclosure letter sat on the table for a couple of days, a silent testament to what happens when you give everything to someone who doesn't know how to hold it. I didn't shred it or toss it out. I left it there, a reminder to myself. I wouldn't be their safety net anymore. I wouldn't carry the weight of what they'd chosen to throw away. And in that quiet moment, alone in my small kitchen, I felt something I hadn't felt in a long time. I felt done. It didn't take long for the fallout to spill online. My father posted first, a simple line on his Facebook page: "We thought we raised them right. But you can't control who walks away." He tagged me by name, right there for everyone to see. I read it in the middle of my lunch break at work. My hands went cold. My father, who'd spent my whole life telling me to keep the peace, had decided to go public now. To put my name out there for anyone to judge. Jonah reposted it with a little flourish: "Some people only care when it's theirs." I'd give anything for mom and dad. A neat little rewrite of the past, a lie dressed up like a confession. I stared at the comments. Old neighbors chiming in with heart emojis and "so sorry, hope you're okay." My parents' friends offering prayers. My cousin Rachel, who once borrowed $1,000 from me without ever paying it back, clicked like. It felt like a slap in the face. For a second, I almost wanted to write something. To lay it all out: the late-night checks, the equipment I paid for, the endless little fixes I'd made so no one else had to worry. But I stopped. I realized that no matter what I said, they'd already decided who I was in this story. I was the villain. The ungrateful daughter who'd abandoned her poor family. That was the part they'd given me, and they were going to play it out until the last act. I scrolled through the comments, numb. It wasn't that I didn't care, it was that I was done fighting to be understood. I'd spent my whole life trying to be seen for who I really was, and all it had ever gotten me was a seat at a table where I didn't belong. That night, I lay in bed, my phone still buzzing with notifications I refused to open. I thought about all the nights I'd stayed up worrying about them. All the times I'd driven through the night to help Dad with the harvest, or paid bills with money I should have been saving for myself. And I realized something that cut deeper than any of their posts: they weren't just blaming me, they were replacing me. They were rewriting the story so they wouldn't have to feel the weight of what they'd done. They would rather call me cruel than admit they'd chosen Jonah over and over again, even when it cost them everything. The finality of it settled over me like a cold blanket. They'd made their choice. And now, so had I. I turned off my phone and stared at the ceiling in the dark, letting the silence wrap around me. My family would always see me as the problem. But I knew better. I wasn't the problem. I was the proof that they couldn't keep pretending. And for the first time, that felt like enough. It happened on a Tuesday morning, of all days. I was in the middle of a meeting with a client when my assistant knocked on the glass door, her expression pinched. "Claire, your parents and brother are here. They're asking to see you." I paused, my breath catching in my throat. "Did they say why?" She shook her head. "Just said it's urgent." I felt a flicker of panic, but I kept my voice calm. Tell them I'll be down in 10 minutes. She nodded and closed the door behind her. I turned back to the client, forced a polite smile, and wrapped up the meeting with brisk efficiency. My mind wasn't on work anymore. It was on the family I knew was waiting for me in the lobby, no doubt already working out their script. When I stepped into the lobby, they were standing in a huddle near the windows. My father's hands were shoved in his pockets, Mom's eyes were red and puffy, and Jonah was slouched against the wall, staring at the floor like a kid in detention. I stopped a few feet away, arms folded, keeping my distance. What's going on? My mother's eyes flicked up to mine, full of that mix of pleading and blame I knew too well. Claire, we need to talk, she said softly. This has gone on long enough. I didn't say anything. I just waited. My father cleared his throat. Look, we know you're angry, but we're family, and family doesn't turn its back when things get hard. My lips twitched. Is that what this is? Family? Or is this about the money? About the vineyard? Don't do that, Jonah snapped, straightening up. You're acting like you're the only one who ever did anything for this family. I felt my jaw tighten, but I kept my voice calm. I'm not acting. I know exactly what I did. I also know exactly what you did. And what you didn't. My mother's face crumpled. Claire, please. We were trying to do what's best for everyone. Jonah, he just needed a little more help. We didn't mean to hurt you. I took a deep breath, feeling the steady rhythm of my heartbeat in my ears. You didn't just hurt me. You erased me. You made me a footnote in my own family's story. Jonah stepped forward, his expression hard. You're making this bigger than it is. You think you're the only one who ever sacrificed? We all did. I let out a soft laugh, shaking my head. You're right, Jonah. We all did. The difference is, I didn't do it for credit or to be the hero. I did it because it was the right thing to do. And you took it like it was your birthright. He flushed, his mouth opening and closing, but no words came out. My father tried again. Claire, can we please just put this behind us? We're here now. We're asking for your help. I looked at each of them, one by one, and felt something shift in my chest, something I hadn't even known I was still holding on to. I exhaled slowly, my voice steady and final. You chose him. Now live with that choice. My mother's lips parted, but I didn't wait for her to speak. I turned and walked away, back through the glass doors of my office building, the cold air of the lobby washing over me like a baptism. I didn't look back. Let them stand there with their regrets, their half-formed apologies, their carefully crafted stories. Let them sit with the truth they'd spent so long trying to bury. I was done. And this time I wasn't going to be the one who came back to pick up the pieces. A week later, I took a walk through my old neighborhood. It was early evening, the sky a hazy blue, and the air smelled like dry grass and sweet grape skins. I hadn't meant to come here. I'd just found myself driving past the rows of houses and the winding roads that led to the vineyard. I pulled over and stepped out, my boots crunching on the gravel as I made my way down the path toward the vineyard gates. The sign out front, the one I'd painted myself in high school, the one with the swirling script and the deep red letters, was gone. The shutters on the main house were cracked and peeling. The porch swing I'd rehung so many summers ago was empty, drifting lazily in the breeze. For a moment, I stood there, taking it all in. The vineyard was up for sale now. I'd seen the listing online, overgrown vines, shuttered doors, the real estate agent's bright, hopeful language trying to spin ruin into opportunity. It felt strange to see it like this, to see the place that had consumed so much of my life already slipping into the hands of strangers. My phone buzzed in my pocket. I pulled it out and saw a string of missed calls from Mom and Dad. A voicemail from Jonah. I didn't listen. I didn't need to hear their voices to know what they wanted. It was always the same. Come back, fix it, make it whole again. But I wouldn't. Not this time. I let the phone go dark in my hand, my fingers tracing the chipped edge of the old fence post. I felt, not empty, exactly. Not angry, either. Just still. Like everything inside me had finally gone quiet. I turned and walked back to my car, the sun dipping low behind the hills, throwing long shadows across the vines. I didn't rush. I didn't look back. When I got home, I made a cup of tea and sat by the window, watching the street outside grow dark. My phone buzzed again, a last flicker of noise in the quiet. I silenced it, set it aside, and let the stillness wash over me. For the first time, I wasn't carrying anything but my own weight. Not the vineyard. Not the family's debts or their hopes or their endless, unspoken expectations. Just me. My breath, my heartbeat, the steady rhythm of a life that finally belonged to me. I wasn't vindicated. There were no dramatic speeches, no final arguments. Just this, a slow, calm realization that I was free. And that was enough.